Hi, my name's Tyler, and thanks for wanting to learn a little bit more about the Impact Driven Leader Book Club. So let me answer this question. Who's it for? It's for leaders today. When I first started my businesses years ago, I was a man on an island. I was trying to figure it out on my own. I didn't know where to read, what to read, how to read. And then I had somebody give me a book. My friend Rick gave me a book, and years later I read it, and I started to learn. Because you do that when you read books. So I want to invite you into this community. One, so we can read together. We can learn together. One of the things that I found out and figured out is when you learn with others, you learn so much more. When you read with others, you ask questions, they'll learn things that you didn't. They'll read things you didn't. So why this book club? Because I want to help people grow and learn and become better leaders, to be an impact-driven leader. That's what I've really tried to do in my life through my different opportunities and businesses. And so I want to invite you into that. We're going to read together. We're going to listen to a podcast with the author. I'm going to have them share more intimate details that'll be available in the book club. We'll be able to connect with other people that are maybe going through the same struggles. And at the end of the day, we're going to learn together because it's about doing it together. So I'm excited for you to be a part of the community. Let's go. Click the link and join. I'm so excited. Dr. Leaf, thank you for being a guest. Thank you for taking this opportunity. And I'm excited for, your book. I was actually able to, pick up your book yesterday. I'll just let our audience know. So I reached out to you guys yesterday. Here we are this morning going through this. I listened to about half the book. I got through the other half of it. I have pages and pages of questions.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm excited to sit at your feet, but I would love just for you to, unpack it at the start, cleaning up your mental mess. What do you hope is, the audience, the reader is going to gain from reading this book, but just starting that process?
Okay, so that's a great question. Thank you so much for having me on your show. And I'm so glad it worked out. And we've got a mutual friend, John Maxwell, and
Yes.
just how we kind of connected, which is so wonderful. Well, and thank you as well. I'm excited. This book is really a culmination of 38 years of research, and I've been in the field for nearly 4 decades, which is a long time, and studying the mind-brain connection. And initially started out clinically, and then sort of like serious cases, traumatic brain injury, and people with autism and dementias and learning disabilities and severe traumas. And from there, it basically my research just branched out into all different areas because people in corporate education, whatever, because humans have a mind, and I was researching mind. So my objective, and which is really culminated in this book, which by the way is my 19th book. This is number 19, so I'm very excited. It's really to help people understand that it's okay to be a mess. If you're human, mental mess is a normal part of existence, and the more we try and deny that, the worse it'll actually become. So if we recognize that, then we can manage it. And as soon as we're managing our mental mess, we can then get into these incredibly high intellectual states and cognitive flexibility and creativity and that kind of thing. So it's a normal human response to feel anxious, depressed, frustrated, irritated, exasperated, concerned, worried. These are all responses. They're actually warning signals. They're a warning signal to us that something's going on in our life. They're not that you have now got a neuropsychiatric brain disease or something. It's actually that there's something going on in your life that you need to pay attention to. So cleaning up your mental mess is really to put into the hands of everyone, no matter what age, no matter what you believe, no matter who you are. You have a mind. Your mind is always with you, and you wake up with your mind, you go to bed with your mind, you eat with your mind, you're talking and listening now with your mind. It never stops. So what is mind? How do we manage it? Do we have agency over our mind? In other words, do we have agency over the toxic thoughts that our mind produce? And what is memory? What are thoughts? All of that information I've put together in this book, and then I've created a system that I developed over 38 years ago when I developed the initial science and the initial theory, and then continued the research because a scientist should keep researching and improve what they do. And I put together a concept called the neurocycle, which is in the book, in the second half of the book, which is the practical, how do we clean up our mental mess? So the first half is what is the mental mess, and the second half is how do we clean up our mental mess? Everything's science-based. There's my most recent clinical trials are summarized in the book in a super simple way. And I give you the hands-on 38 years expertise in a system that's been developed over 38 years ago, but refined over these 38 years. And it's how you use your mind to drive your mind, to change the neuroplasticity of your brain and your body. And the consequence is that you're actually managing your mental mess and functioning and enabling you to do what only you can do. Does that give you a good summary?
Oh, yeah, I think that's great. I mean, that's a great start. Absolutely. And, as I got through the book and, as we mentioned, I really crammed to get through it. I
I'm
caused myself a
super
little,
I'm super
I won't,
impressed.
yeah, I won't lie to you. Last night, as I'm going through this and just taking it all in, I'm so excited to be able to chat with you and just revere your work and this idea of mindset. And my brain started to frazzle a little bit. I was a little bit, I had too much coming in, and I even had to, lay down. And, anyways, this is where I think there's a couple things that really, really stuck out to me. And one of the things I want to first start, as you're a parent, you have 4 kids, so excited that your 3 daughters are working with you. That's fun. I have 3 kids, and as so many parents, and especially when you take parenting as leadership, which I believe when you approach parenting as leadership, where does this cascade of the mind brain, where is the brain malleable to the point to where it's like, oh, we can make a big difference there? And I'm going to follow that up. Is the generation that we have now, the Gen Z, going to be better off because we understand this than maybe older generations? So those are, I know, 2 questions at once, but I'd love to hear you break that apart.
Um, Brilliant questions, very insightful and very, very important questions. So the best way I think to answer this is to explain what the mind is and what the brain is. And then in doing that, once we understand that, then we can apply to to the younger generation, from the millennials down Gen Z and so on. Is that okay? Does that sound like
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
perfect. So I've got some models to help. So have you got viewers and listeners? Do you have
yeah.
Okay, so
Oh, this is,
if
I
some,
love this.
okay, so if some people are just listening, I'll just describe it. So I'm holding a
Yeah.
brain in a skull, but it's not a real brain, don't worry, okay? We love to use this because we are in an era where we are told that we are our brain. Mind and brain have been used interchangeably. So when you talk about mind, people think, oh, that's brain. But it's not. Mind and brain are separate, and that's one of the key issues in getting autonomy over our mind or cleaning up the mental mess. You have to recognize that you can do it. And if you think you are your brain, that hope of being able to manage your mind or clean up your mental mess or just manage what life throws at you feels kind of one of those things that's impossible. It's sort of a difficult thing to process. So it's important we understand mind versus brain. So mind is not the brain. And I'm going to use another model now, which even makes it easier to understand. So this is a little model of the body, as you can see, and there's the brain, and half the brain disappeared with one of my travels. It fell out, so I don't know where it's lost half a brain. So this is your physical part of you, and our physical is 1 to 10% of who we are. So this is super interesting. So if you look at yourself, this is only 1 to 10% of who you are, and 10% is pushing it. The other 90 to 99% is your mind. So the difference between a dead person, where the body is just disintegrated, and an alive person, us having this conversation and the viewers and listeners, is your mind. Your mind is that difference between being alive and being dead. So mind is your aliveness. And aliveness is your ability to do what we're doing right now, which is communicate. But it's also, to communicate, we have to process what we're each saying to each other. And the listeners and viewers are processing what they are hearing. So they're having an experience. We're having an experience of a discussion around mind brain, and the viewers and listeners are listening to our discussion about the mind, brain, and mental health. So we're all having an experience, and that experience is processed through the mind into the brain, and the brain responds. So the brain and the body are responders, and the mind uses the brain and the body to basically build the experience into. We build the experience into the brain and into the body, and we build it into the mind, but I'll explain that in a moment. And so therefore the brain is the responder. So the mind is actually the thinking, feeling, choosing aliveness that surrounds the body. So to make this even easier, that we're not floating at the moment, we all agree. We understand we have gravity and gravitational fields. We may not understand what they are, but we know that that's keeping us grounded in our chair. So what the scientists have also discovered, and this work started around 150 years ago, is that not only do we have gravitational fields and electromagnetic fields that we live in the universe, but the human body has their own unique gravitational field as well. So surrounding every brain and body Every one of us, you and I, we each have our own unique gravitational field that moves around and through us. It's an electromagnetic field as well. And so that's what's our aliveness. Someone who's dead doesn't have that. So that's your mind. Your mind is this powerful force that enables you to receive the experiences that you're going through, which start at the moment you open your eyes and continue till you go to bed at night. And each of those experiences processed through your mind, which is this gravitational field. But on a psychological level, it's your thinking, feeling, and choosing. So mind in action is thinking, feeling, and choosing. So we have the experience, we're listening, we're thinking, feeling, and choosing all these electromagnetic light waves and fancy physics stuff, and that then gets converted into these in your brain, little thought trees inside of your brain. So we're growing trees inside of our brain. So right now, at 400 billion actions per second, you and the listeners and viewers are converting my words and all these visuals, which are electromagnetic and sound waves and electromagnetic waves, all this fancy stuff, into little protein tree-like structures in your brain, inside the sort of trees inside your brain. In your body, my words are actually going into every DNA, into the DNA of every cell of your body. So we have a shift that the brain, the little tree in the brain then influences immediately every cell in the body. And in the gravitational fields of your mind, you're going to have a new little wave. That's this information. Now, that's a lot of information that I'm giving you, but I'm saying that to tell you how powerful you are. That means that when you open your eyes between now and when you go to sleep tonight, you will do this 8,000 to 10,000 times. You will convert every experience into physical structures in your brain. Why is that so important? Well, that is what you then operate from. So everything you say and do in the next moment is influenced by what you've just built into your brain. So each experience becomes a thought, and that thought then produces your words and actions. So it's okay if it's green, like we see this one is a healthy thought, and and this is a thought. So you think, I don't know if you caught that, you think, feel, and choose, and you build thoughts. So thoughts are real things that are in your brain, and you actually control this process if you want to. Or it can just happen, it's going to happen anyway. Or it can be just randomly happening, and then there's a chance you'll make a mess of it. And we all do that. Life's kind of experimental because we don't quite know from the time we open our eyes till the time we go to bed that exactly how we're going to respond and what's coming up. We can't control the events and circumstances, but we can get our mind into such a self-regulated state. We can learn to manage our mind. We can manage this think, feel, choose thing that we can influence the types of thoughts that we build because these inform our next decisions. And the more we think about them, the more established they become. And what's interesting about this thought, which is what we grow into our brain, and this change that we make in our brain, we call neuroplasticity. What's interesting about this neuroplastic change in the brain in the form of a thought is it's got different parts. Like a tree's got roots and a trunk and little branches. What I am saying are the root memories. So every experience has an origin, a source. So that's the bullying, it's the toxic media, it's the ugly email, it's the comment from someone, it's the financial worry. So that's the origin of the event. Then this part, the tree trunk, is your perspective of that, your kind of overall perspective, and then that branches out into these branches, which is your interpretation in terms of your life experience of what you've just experienced. So we get it, we get an overarching view, and then we draw on all our other memories that are relevant to build these, and then that whole thing then influences what you say and what you do. Now I go to this deep explanation to show you that if we're a mess, that's what we build. We don't build this. So this process I've just described is happening 24/7. During the day, you are think, feeling, and choosing to build. At nighttime, you sort out the thoughts that you've been building. So you wake up with your mind, you go to bed with your mind, okay? Your mind's always operating. Not even 3 seconds does your mind stop. So if you don't manage it, you create this. And
Which is for the listeners, it's a describe that tree.
So this is I'm holding the one tree that's healthy,
Okay.
beautiful green tree. It's like a beautiful green plant. But the other one that I'm now holding up is a toxy, wiry looking tree. So it looks like a dead tree, but it's very much alive in your brain. But I use this because the thoughts look like trees in the brain. We talk about thoughts having an arbor-like structure, which is a tree-like structure. And we see that when people have a toxic response, go through a toxic experience, that then they are thinking and feeling and choosing in a toxic way in response to whatever, they build this. You can't not build, because as soon as whatever you experience goes through your brain and the building happens, regardless of whether it's healthy, toxic, happy, sad, it goes in your brain and you change your brain. The toxic one means that it's still built, but it's built differently. So these trees are built of proteins in the brain. Just I'm going to give you the most simple structure.
Yeah.
So in the green trees, the proteins are folded correctly. They're doing what they should. In the toxic tree, the proteins are folded incorrectly, so they're not doing what they should. And that affects everything. Now, this then disrupts the entire environment of the brain and body because this is seen in the same, recognized in the same way as if you had a virus in your brain or your body. So we all know about COVID virus. We all know that COVID virus produces a response in our immune system. What you may not have known, and this is why this is so significant, is that thoughts are as real as a virus, and this toxic thought is going to stimulate the same response in the brain as if you had a virus in your body, whatever, or a bacteria or whatever, because this threatens survival. Our brain and body are not designed for toxic issues or unmanaged. Two things. It's not designed for toxicity of any sort. So whether it's a bacteria or a virus or a toxic thought or a from a toxic experience or a toxic habit or a toxic reaction. So as soon as these happen, the immune system responds and sends out inflammatory factors. And that's why we get inflammation in our brain and our body. Our cortisol levels will increase. Our homocysteine levels and all kinds of biomarkers in our body will increase. If we don't get rid of the virus, if we don't get rid of the toxic thought, those continue to get worse. And when we do that, then the entire environment of our body shifts into a very vulnerable state. And when your body's in a vulnerable state, you are now increasingly vulnerable to disease and all kinds of stuff that is floating around out there. So suppressed toxic thoughts over a long period of time can increase your vulnerability to disease from 35 to 70 to 98%. That's a huge factor. So But we can change that. With mind management, you completely control that. So that's a long first part of the question, but with that foundation, I don't know if you want to ask some questions to unpack, and then we'll
No. I mean, I could go a long ways, and we won't get back. So I want to get back, and then we'll go into that because
Yes,
I'll just share
absolutely.
the idea that toxic thoughts are viewed as a virus by the brain. Dude, you just put that everywhere, okay?
Yeah. That's one of those mic drop moments. It's one of those,
Yeah,
hey, now, because people, you can't see your thoughts. You can see your hands. You can see a virus we can see under a microscope,
yeah,
but people think, we don't really look at thoughts. But thoughts, I've got great images, and in my book, I'm sure you've seen,
yeah.
I actually got some colored images in the book, and they're pretty cool. And that's what thoughts look like in your brain. I mean, there we go. There's a picture. For those of you
Yeah.
that are not seeing this, you can get the book. Hopefully, you'll go get it on Amazon or wherever. But you'll see little tree-like structures. And that's what thoughts look like in your brain. And now, if they're toxic, your brain's immune system says, hey, alert, warning, this is threatening survival. It doesn't go with our wired for love, and it's going to affect us. It's putting you into vulnerability. So then there's warning signals. And those warning signals will be in the form of emotions that you feel. So that's what an emotion, because you always, mind is think, feel, choose. So to build these, you've been thinking, feeling, choosing. So to warn you about your toxic thinking, feeling, and choosing, your body shoots out the toxic feelings. So that's why when we feel depression or anxiety or frustration or irritation, that's this thing saying, hey, this is the wrong signal, and that your body's saying, hey, pay attention. So it's not an illness. This is not a neuropsychiatric brain disease. Sure, it's changed the brain. It's increased the vulnerability of the brain. But that's the response of the brain. It's not the cause. And we're in an era, and I have a whole chapter in the book, as you would have seen at the beginning of the book. We've been in an era for about 40 years now, where we've been saying that every experience you have is a function of the brain, because mind is brain. That's what they've been saying, which is wrong. So therefore, you feel sad, your brain's damaged. If you feel depressed, your brain's damaged. If you feel anxious, you've got some kind of brain disease. And that's not the truth. It's not correct. Yes, you've got to look at your brain as a responder, but you can't let that's not your driver. Obviously, if people have a traumatic brain injury, that's an external damage to the brain, and that definitely does affect mind and affect brain. But even so, I've done the research. My first research was done with people with traumatic brain injury, with severe cognitive damage and emotional damage. And not only did they restore healing, but they functioned post mind management at a higher level than pre-accident. So they were better after the accident with mind management than pre-accident with no brain damage. I mean, how insane is that? So if you manage your mind, you can turn anything around. And I'm not saying that this is not toxic positivity. This is not saying if I think happy thoughts, I'm going to be fine. Absolutely not.
Well, you actually, I know I'm going to ask a question here because you actually break this apart. The fact of, we'll get back to the age question. I'll remember. I'll get back to the age question. We'll get back to it.
Back to
But
that. This is a good
one of the things
foundation.
Yeah, one of the things that you break apart in your book, which I think is so relevant, and I have the page noted. You probably know it, but I think it's so important here. Let me find in my notes because I want to read it because it's so much more
Good.
imperative. It is okay. It is on page 107 for those in the book, and you say using techniques or positive affirmations as a band aid rather than seeking a long term solution will create incoherence in the brain, which over time can lead to a variety of mental and physical issues. So you're saying in that, this idea of positive affirmations, I'll just dump band-aids on top of it, that'll fix the injury. I got a broken bone, I have, this big major injury, I'll just put band-aids on it. That's what our society does with positive affirmations, as opposed to, hey, why do we have these feelings? As you said, understanding these emotional responses, our depression, our anxiety, it's like, oh, okay, I feel this. And as one of the things that you say later in the book is emotional warning signals are invitations to look inward.
Exactly. Isn't that a great statement?
Oh, I love
I
it.
mean, it's the most, that is literally what it is. It's an invitation to look inside and look at these. And you know, the beautiful thing, Tyler, that happens the minute you take up the invitation. So instead of saying depression, bad, go to doctor, get drugs, suppress, band-aid, whatever, positive, 10, quickly, let me say my 10 positive affirmations. This is still there. And this
Yeah.
is the thing that's disrupting the environment of the body. And it's feeding back into the mind. And we've got, so it's from the mind to the brain and then to the body. And now we've got this whole feedback loop going. And then we're wondering why our life is kind of, and why our creativity is going, and why relationships are suffering, why business is not doing what. And then you're getting all this great advice from people like you, but you're still stuck in this mode. So so they don't apply it. So it becomes data as opposed to hardcore transformational knowledge. So until you manage your mind, people are not going to listen properly to the good advice of people like yourself. So
Well, I'm going to use this imagination of if your mind is a garden, is it the fertile soil to where that seed can fall on and actually bloom and grow, or is it that rocky soil that it's like, again, that if I look at those two plants, you have the one that's the wire structure. If you're trying to build within that soil, which that one's growing in, which I'm learning from you is creating that toxic nature where your brain's looking at, hey, this is a virus, and even if there's a healthy seed falling underneath there, and this root is there without going in and tilling the soil. I'm using a lot of imagery here that's coming to me, but it's like
I
if we
used to
think
say,
of our brain as that garden, it is our opportunity to say, hey, how do we weed it? How do we fertilize it? How do we do with what? And that's what I'm totally understanding now even more how the neural cycle fits in, because you're getting to the root. And we'll go
exactly,
through that, have
exactly.
you explain, the 5 elements of the neural cycle and how does the, perfect segue, how does the neural cycle take and deal with that wire-based plant as opposed to nurturing the healthy green plant?
Okay, so
The thoughts.
so what we need to do is, as you said, invitation to go in. So we have to look at. So we all understand now that mind is this how we're processing. So we are just to lay the foundation.
Yeah.
You open your eyes. You go through the day. In this particular day, you're going to build. I don't know if you guys got this 8,000 to 10,000 of these. Hopefully more of these than these. But things happen. Like you read that toxic comment on Instagram and you get a reaction, or something happens, or you've got patterns that you in your life that you're not paying attention to, and it's coming up every day. That's some kind of root cause there. So the first thing is that there's a lot of that going. There's a lot of stuff going on in your mind. In order to build a thought, I just want to also add this. In order to build these thoughts, you also have other thoughts coming up. So as I'm speaking now, the reason that you're able to ask questions is because your thoughts are coming up of what you stimulating, and that's a normal thing. As you are having an experience, existing thoughts will jump up. So where do they come from? And to pick up on your, I'd use the analogy of gardens a lot, but I use a forest. So because these trees form a forest. So you have your conscious mind and your non-conscious mind. And I have to explain this because otherwise the
Yeah.
neurocycle is not going to make sense. So, but
Okay.
so to pick up, you've started giving the introduction of the analogy of the garden, which is what I use, but I use a forest. So I want you to imagine that you are in a helicopter and you are the pilot and you're the co-pilot. And I'll explain why in a moment. And you are flying over this huge forest, and that forest is filled mainly with green trees. Every thought tree, and as you see, a tree is made of roots and branches, so the thought is made of the roots, like I explained, which is the origin, and the branches, which is your interpretation. Okay, so you've got thousands, millions, trillions, gazillions, as far as the eye can see, you have these trees. Some are little, recent experience. Some are medium-sized. Some are huge, from stuff from years ago. You've been doing this since at a certain point in the womb. You've been responding to life and building these thoughts. So everything, your nurturing, your everything you've ever been exposed to is in these trees in your brain and in the wavy trees in the non-conscious mind surrounding your brain. I mean, in the conscious mind, the mind stuff, that gravitational field, and in your DNA of every cell, and you have 37 to 100 trillion cells. That's a lot. So every experience goes in 3 places. Okay, so that's why when you re-experience something, you feel it in your body. It's this incredibly huge experience. When someone who's working through the neurocycle and they experience flashbacks, it's very traumatic. It can bring a panic attack on because your whole body responds, your whole mind responds, your whole brain. It's a whole experience, and if you're not prepared for that, you think there's something wrong with you. And if the doctors that don't understand this say, oh, it's your disease, let's suppress it, that's the worst thing you can do, because now you damage your brain and you push this back down, and when it's suppressed, it's going to get worse. So this forest you're flying over is your non-conscious mind, NON. Non-conscious mind is active 24/7. It's the biggest part of your 99%. It's huge, infinite. It's time travel. It's present, past, and future happening kind of all at the same time. Our mind time travels all the time. Right at the moment, you're hearing me in the present, but in order to process what I'm saying, you're time traveling to process what I'm saying. It's just how we work. Okay, so you time traveling across this whole thing all the time. That's your non-conscious mind. Your conscious mind is awake when you're awake. So now we're awake, so our conscious mind is working with the non-conscious. Because when you go to sleep tonight, only the non-conscious is working. The subconscious is between the two. So when we talk about taking the invitation, listening to the invitation to look inward, the invitation is coming through the subconscious from the non-conscious. So the non-conscious is massive. It channels the thought through the subconscious. It's like a little bridge. And here's the conscious, here's this infinite non-conscious, and here's the bridge of the subconscious. When we use our conscious mind in a deliberate and intentional way, in other words, when we self-regulate ourselves to bring all thoughts into captivity, okay, when we catch those thoughts, and we can, neuroscience shows us that we can consciously and deliberately, when we conscious, we can use our veto power. We can consciously and deliberately look at our thoughts every 10 seconds, which means that the whole time that I'm awake today, I can consciously and deliberately monitor my thinking, feeling, and choosing, the thoughts I'm building, my responses, the reactions. I can do all of that, okay? So can you. But that skill develops. Initially, we're not so good at it. But as you use the neurocycle, so you become a master self-regulator. To be a master leader, to be a master anything, you have to be a master mind manager. And that mind manager is basically goes hand in hand with self-regulation. You can't manage. Mind management is self-regulating. So when we talk about all this whole thing, the neurocycle is how you train yourself to be a self-regulated mind manager. You're managing your mind in a very self-regulated way all the time, and the neurocycle trains you to do that. So you learn to do it in the moment with the little things that happen, like the arguments, the politics, the comments, the imposter syndrome, the whatever, and then the big stuff, which are the established toxic traumas and patterns, etc., etc. And you use the neurocycle to build new habits in your brain, and you can use it for that next leadership goal that you have. So if you're trying to change something in your business or creativity and so on. So that's just all the multiple specific things you can use it for. So here you are in your little helicopter, and it's this hovering time machine helicopter, Back to the Future style. It's like really cool, okay? So you are the pilot, and you're going through the messiness of life. And now, as I explain this analogy, start thinking if you're a parent, if you're a leader, whatever it is that you do in your life, and start just seeing how you as a person, a parent, a leader, business, whatever it is that you do, start with your most you as a person, and then your relationships, and then what you do. Kind of go in 3 circles like that. And just start listening to what I'm saying about those and keep that in mind. Okay, now that I've said it, I've put you into self-regulation. So as soon as I said that, you've started observing yourself. Okay, and I teach exactly how to do this in the book. Okay, so now you're thinking about that, you're in your helicopter, the pilot is you, the messy you. Life is one big experiment, and that's okay. You can be messy, you can be anxious, you can be worried. Those are all just you trying to understand, and it's you inviting yourself to look at the signals of how well are you doing this thing called life? How well are you responding in this moment? If you don't self-regulate, it just becomes one big kind of jumbled, chaotic mess. And we put our body into those states and we create a lot of these. And we will create these as well, but we'll create a lot more of these. If we manage that process through training ourselves through the neurocycle, then that messy pilot listens more to the co-pilot. The co-pilot is also you, but the you in the co-pilot mode is the wise, calm, wired for love. And we see that our brain and body, from neuroscience, our brain and our body are wired for love. We do not have any structures, or even down to a subatomic level, for toxicity. What we have in our brain and our body is a whole design in our mind, brain, and body for this, the healthy trees, and for number 2, managing these. So even if I haven't fixed them, if I am attempting to manage them, I've shifted my body out of a toxic state. But if I ignore these, shove them back in my unconscious, don't listen to the invitation coming from through the subconscious, then I'm going to increase toxicity in my body and the whole immune response and brain going crazy. And you can see in the first part of the book, I show exactly how that happens. But if I listen to the invitation, I change that. So the listening to the invitation, now we're going to get into the neurocycle. The co-pilot speaks in you instead of I. So the pilot speaks in I. Don't know what I'm doing. I'm feeling anxious. And the you says, that's okay. How are you feeling? I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling worried. I'm feeling really worked up. I'm getting this narrative in my head that this and this and this. It's making me feel physically awful. I can see my behaviors are just like I'm not functioning well at work. It's affecting how whatever, and my perspective. And so you start answering the co-pilot. The two of you are doing this kind of exercise together. So I've done it quickly, so let's slow it down. So you now are flying over this forest, and there's this invitation to pay attention, to go inward. The invitation is in the form of that clump of trees that you see over there. It's really dark. They're really big, and they're blocking the middle part of the forest. The middle part of the forest is this beautiful green strip of these healthy trees that are exquisite. That's your wired for love mode. That's your survival mode. We designed for love, which is pure survival. Okay, we're designed to operate in that mode. In science, we also talk about the optimism bias. You may have heard a lot in the media, we have a negativity bias. Incorrect science. We are not drawn to the negative because we are negatively wired. We are drawn to the negative because we are wired for positivity. I hate that word, positivity. We wired for love. We wired for survival. And so therefore anything toxic threatens our survival. So when we're paying attention to the negativity in politics, the news, or in our life, it's not because we are drawn to it because we're drawn to negative. We're drawn to it because we're trying to fix it. It's an imbalance. It's created a threat to our survival. Yes, if we don't manage that, we'll get absorbed and embraced. We'll get stuck in it, and then we become more toxic. That's why you have to manage everything. You have to manage this desire for survival. Otherwise, it can turn on you, and you can become toxic. Okay, so you've landed your helicopter with your pilot and your co-pilot, and you the pilot with your co-pilot, and your co-pilot has direct access to the middle of the forest, which is this wired for love survival mode. And as you now look at this toxic issue, which you've received the invitation, the smoke signal, the alarm went off, you're now paying attention. So you've landed the helicopter and you get out, you're safe, you're with your co-pilot. You approach this with acceptance. You approach this with, it's okay. Every human on the planet since the beginning of time has battled with their mind. Depression, they say that to us, that 1 in 4 people are depressed. 1 in 5 people have anxiety. Depression and anxiety are increasing. Mental health is a pandemic. Suicides are increasing. Deaths of despair. I talk about it in my book. All of that is wrong. Okay? What am I saying? And you might be saying, hey, but we're all feeling Of course you're feeling a mental mess. But it's not, what's wrong is not the mental mess, not the anxiety. What's wrong is that it's increasing. What's wrong is that it is a new thing. What's wrong is that it's an illness. What's right is that since the beginning of time, mankind has battled with their mind and battled with mental health and battled with a mental mess. It's not increasing, it's just changed. Every generation faces something else. We had people in World War I going through extreme trauma. World War II, the Spanish flu. I mean, we can go, what about...
I'll go back as far as Solomon. When he wrote Ecclesiastes, that was him, struggling in his mind.
Exactly. It's not something new, but we've mismanaged it. We've tried to take human suffering and medicalize it and to make it part of a biomedical model and tell you that if you feel sad, you have a chemical imbalance, you need a drug. That's not the truth. It's not science. It's not accurate. No scientist worth their grain of salt will even say those kind of things. But that's the message that is marketed to the average population.
Sure.
So I'm saying to you, land your tree, give yourself permission to feel the depression, the anxiety, look at them and celebrate them not for the depression, but for what they're telling you. The invitation they're giving you, they are helpful messengers, and they're telling you that there's something going on. And if you work through and find the cause, you will get control. The minute you land the helicopter, you've already shifted control. The minute you fly over, you've lost control. It controls you. So and in neuroscience, we see that as soon as you face something, this then changes structure and becomes weaker. So as soon as it's weaker, what can you do? You can change it. So I'm giving you the steps of how to capture a thought and renew your mind. I'm literally giving you the science of that process. Okay, so all that elaborate. Now we can go fast. We've landed the plane. Now we start gathering awareness. This is a big apple tree, okay, and it's got tons and tons of apples, and some of this has got rotten apples. And if you go up to the tree, it's going to fall on your head and knock you out. So you don't do that. That's what we so often do. We dive in and then we get knocked out and overwhelmed. You stand back and you take this thing slowly. You do 15 to 45 minutes a day. You go through the 5 steps systematically. You work through this for 21 days. You do all 5 steps for 15 to 45 minutes for 21 days. After that, you haven't finished. You then take step 5 and you do it for another 42 days. That will give you a 63-day cycle, which is the scientific time that we need to identify and rewire this. So to embrace, process, and reconceptualize this to the point that you can change your behavior. To be a great leader of whatever you are in, you have to be managing this all the time. Only 3% of leaders are talking about mental health. So that's 97% of leaders are not, which means that 97% of leaders are leading people to not talk about their mental health. And if we don't talk about mental health, we're burying it. We are creating a sick population. In this book, I give you the statistics. Between 96 and 2014, because of us burying everything, the church, only 4% of the church are talking about mental health. So if we've got 3% of leaders, 4% of the church, that means the majority of people are not talking about it. When they do, it's a big scary illness that no one can control.
Totally.
And that
when we're talking about it, it's this massive, ugly problem as opposed to, it's something we can manage through.
It's life. It's not a big, ugly problem. They've made it one. Okay, and when you make it a problem and you ignore the mind, and because you've done for 40 years, you land up with this statistic. We have been advancing medically and technologically. We all understand that. We all agree. We also know that people have been living longer. We all agree with that. Okay, so those 3 statements. However, this changed. Between 96 and 2014, the trend reversed. Now, in this 2021, pre-even pandemic, it started from 96, showed up in 2014 strongly, and it's got even worse by 2021. And that is that people are now dying younger by 8 to 25 years than they were for decades. We've been increasing the trend. Now it's reversed. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is that in this advanced technological and medical age, because we do not manage our mind and we suppress it, and that then impacts all our decisions, what we eat, our exercise, how we manage technology, everything boomerangs from your mind, because your mind is the first step. If your mind's unmanaged, everything else is a mess. So for 40 years, we've had this really weird philosophy of this weird kind of management, and now we're sitting with people dying 8 to 25 years younger. But that doesn't have to be you. You can reverse it. Land your plane at the helicopter and live a life of neurocycling. Every day you clean your teeth, you bathe, you clean your house, you have to neurocycle. Neurocycling is quite simply how you manage your mind. And then when you're managing your mind, then they listen to leadership advice, food advice, etc. So here, what the first thing that you do with your co-pilot is you stand back and you gather the apples. You gather awareness. Gather is a beautiful word. It means you controlling it. It's not hitting you. You choosing what you can manage in that moment. Today I can only manage 3 apples. Fine. I can only manage half an apple. Fine. No problem. You gather awareness where you at. And that's why there's the process over the 63 days. Okay, so that's really important. So what kind of apples do you pick? And what does it mean gather? You're gathering awareness of those signals. The invitation to land, now you're looking at the signals. What are they? Emotional. Things like depression and anxiety, frustration, whatever. I have a whole list in the book of different emotional warning signals and an emotional warning signal guide. So you're gathering it with your co-pilot, and everything's okay. Everything's a message. I keep saying that, but that's so important. You gather your physical. What are you feeling in your body? Maybe you've got GI symptoms. Maybe your heart's fluttering. You gather awareness of your behaviors. What are you doing? How are you functioning? Relationships, work, just in the moment. How are you functioning with yourself when you're sitting in bed at night and you're alone? Fourth thing is your perspective. How are you looking at life? How is this affecting your perspective? How often? Is it all the time? Is it just now and then? If it's now and then, why? What are the triggers? So once you've gathered, you move to why, which is the second step, which is reflect. And you start asking, answering, discussing. You then move to the third step. And there's every step, by the way, this is not a quick fix. Every step has had 38 years of meticulous mind-brain research. So when you do gather awareness in the way that I've described super simply in the book, with lots of charts and examples and images, you are making the brain work like it should. You're getting the two sides of the brain to be coherent and all these amazing brain things, and that will increase your intelligence, your cognitive flexibility, your coherence, etc., your introspection. You then write. When you write in the form of a metacog. A metacog is a pattern form where we actually can allow the two sides of the brain will then work together more effectively, and you'll get to the core of the problem quicker. The most phenomenal tool in therapy that I use, it's part 3 of this 5-step process. And I teach you how to do it here.
It's in the book. Yeah.
Yeah. There's images. I also talk about it in my app. I have a neurocycle app, which you can get at Google and iTunes. So you get all this in like audio version. So, I mean, there's an audiobook too, which I narrated. Yeah. But the app is therapy. It's literally me giving you therapy. And there's all kinds of guides, tremendous content in there. And the new version's being released, like, I think in the next 24 hours. It should be out today. So then but let's say that it's in the moment. I want to talk about the right. So let's say that you're just about to do this podcast. Let's just create a scenario just before we started. And let's say that you felt that you haven't prepared because you're trying to read the book in 5 minutes. Yeah. You kind of hinted at that. So you maybe felt a little bit of anxiety. So you could do the 5-step very quickly. You may have done it, which we do this automatically. I'm just making what humans have been doing on an unconscious level. I've just done the science to bring it into our conscious awareness and show it and prove it. And so you would have gathered your thoughts because you've got to get your head back on to do the interview, or you've got to get your head back on to get into the meeting, or whatever it may be. So you quickly gather awareness. I'm feeling a little anxious. Why? Because there's a lot of content. Am I going to ask the right questions? Which you are doing beautifully, by the way. And then you maybe you didn't write, you didn't have time, but maybe you just visualize the scenario. So in the moment, so all you do is you watch yourself. Okay, I'm getting ready for this. I'm a little anxious. It's okay. I've got the book, and I can just read from the book. Whatever. Then your fourth step is the third step in this quick case is you visualized. When you're doing the sitting down over the 21 days, you write. You physically write in your neurocycle journal in the metacog. When it's in the moment, you can just visualize. So as though you're watching yourself through a movie camera, watch yourself gathering and reflecting. Watch the scenario. Recreate the scenario, the experience that stimulated this. And then the fourth step is to then recheck it. So then you would kind of give yourself it's to find the pattern, the antidote. It's a mental autopsy. What are the patterns here? Why am I doing this? What are my activators, my triggers? What could I do instead? And then the fifth step is a little action. And it closes off the cycle. My action is, I'm just going to go in with my book and read from the book if necessary. I mean, that's a simple example, but it could be like the big stuff. On the first day, you may not even get very far. You may only find one apple and say, I'm feeling depressed because of something. That's progress. Tomorrow you pick it up. You don't push through the whole day. The active reach is maybe that days you simply say, I'm making progress. And every time you feel anxious, you don't go back and think of this. You'll do that tomorrow. You just remind yourself, I'm making progress, or whatever it is. So that's basically the concept of the neurocycle. It's very systematized, and it's pushing your mind and brain and body in a certain direction, changing the energy patterns, the waves, the blood flow, the chemistry. It's doing amazing things, and it's giving you control. Okay, long answer, and I know that we need the children's one.
Yes. So wrap up with that one. We'll put a bow on this, and I have so many more questions that maybe we'll have to chat again.
Sounds wonderful. Okay, so as a leader, you're also a parent leader too. The best way for you to help your kids, first of all, this generation is growing up as the most drug generation ever. So actually, if you look at the statistics, it's very negative. I'm older than you. My kids are all big now, but I've got millennials. You've got Gen Z. Okay, so from millennials down, are growing up as the most drug generation. I'm not saying your kids personally, my kids personally, because they aren't. But in general, across the population, they are the most at-risk generation in history. Isn't that scary? With the advances in medicine and technology, we have the most at-risk young generation because they've grown up drugged. They've grown up not being allowed to express their emotions. So and that's why millennials fight against that so much, because the younger generations don't even know what to do. They've got sucked into, if I feel sad or depressed, there's something wrong with me, I need medication. We have removed hope from this generation. And that is bad. And we're seeing we're seeing this hitting them so badly in the pandemic because they got a lot of when young people are with their friends, they can rebuild their hope a lot. But when they aren't with their friends, that hope that's already going from the kind of messages of this generation is removed. So what we have to do as parents is recognize that our children are at threat to live much shorter lifespans than what we are. In fact, the age group most affected currently now is 25 to 64, but it's getting younger. We're seeing that people are dying younger and younger at younger ages, which is very scary. But that doesn't have to be the norm. We can change this and reverse this with mind management. And why I say mind management is the key is because if I as a parent model how I am managing my emotions, if I use the neurocycle and I say to my kids, sorry, I got mad at you, I got upset, or I'm feeling really sad today because, and I show them how I'm managing it, I am modeling them that it's okay to be messy. I have a way to manage my mess, which means I can repair and I can grow. The best way, your kids will do what you do, not what you say. So you've got to yourself give yourself the space to learn how to manage your daily moment, use the neurocycle, model that for them, and then teach to them. My youngest patient was at the age of 3. If you teach your children to mind manage, and my kids have learned this from when they were babies, and they've learned the advanced version as I've developed it. When you teach your kids, so you model it, number one. You learn this, you model it, and you use it in the big and the small stuff, and be very, very open about it. It's okay to be messy. Parents have this thing that I can't be messy. You can. If you don't show your kids messiness and you show them that you've got to be perfect, you've created such a false toxic positivity. They go out in the world and they collapse because they have no model for the life's tough. But my parents made it out to be this bubble. That doesn't help your kids. You need to show them I'm battling. This is why I'm battling. This is what I'm doing about the battle. I made a mess with my parenting in this aspect. Sorry, guys. This is why I did it. This is what I'm doing to repair it. That's how you teach your kids to cope in life. That's how you teach them to respond to the signals. And the other thing is that gets them out then of saying, oh, I'm something wrong with my brain. It gives them hope back to say, okay, well, if my mom or dad are battling and this is what they're doing, there's hope for me. I can battle. Yeah. You saying, hey, I see you sad. Do you want to talk about it? Can I show you this neurocycle to help you? Can I express? Then you change that. Then you have a mindset that can then say, okay, let's address diet. Let's address exercise. Let's address data management, aka too much technology or mismanaged technology, and so on and so on. But that, honestly, I do give you so much in the book.
Yes,
with that.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, and the Neurocycle app, which is also released, which I honestly would recommend you get with it, has got a whole guide for neurocycling for kids. And I've got a book coming out for that. But
awesome.
This is out now. Learn this now. Teach your kids.
Yes.
And this is available wherever books are sold. Amazon, wherever.
Well, I got mine yesterday at Target. And it was the last one. I had to go to 2 different Targets because they were sold out. So that tells me it's really popular here in Spokane, which I'm excited about.
Oh, wow. It's selling out everywhere. I'm actually going to go and do a Target round today and go and sign books at Target and Barnes & Noble and that kind of thing. So, but if they don't get it there, they can get it at Amazon. My Instagram handle is Dr. Caroline Leaf. So if they go to my Instagram and follow me there, they can get to everything. And I have a podcast called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, which then also helps with all this stuff. I said so much. Sorry, I spoke so much.
No, hey, I am. My brain is full, which is good. So many more questions, which can lead into so many things. And again, I would love to chat with you again, but I know you got to go. Thank you so much for your time sharing with me. I know I learned a ton. I know the audience will as well. The book, great tools. Dr. Caroline Leaf, thank you so much. I appreciate getting to spend time with you. And thank you so much for what you're contributing to leaders and to parents.
So much. No, thank you so much. And as you said, parents are leaders too. And honestly, this is really can shift. I'm so excited about this because I've seen over the years, over these nearly 40 years, just the impact on hundreds of, actually millions of people. That's why I'm so passionate to get this into people's hands. Because then with their minds right, as I keep saying, they will then apply the knowledge that people like yourself in the wellness industry can deliver. So there we go. There's so much. So thank you for your time. I've loved to you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.